A strange object fell from space. Written by Christopher Maxim. There it was, a fragment of the universe hurtling through the cosmos. And there I was, gazing up from the comfort of a farmhouse rooftop, built by my father's hands smack dab in the middle of nowhere. In all the years we lived out there on the countryside, not a damn thing remarkable ever happened. This meteor shower was the highlight of my entire life. And that's why, with a bit of wonder glazed over my eyes, I was captivated by that one falling rock, brighter than the rest. I wanted so badly to reach out and touch it, almost as if in answer to my plea. The meteor took a U-turn and fell from the sky like a falcon, diving for its prey. I watched astonished as it passed overhead and crashed into the wooded area behind my dad's property. Surprisingly, there was no sound, no explosion, just the rustling of tree leaves as it plummeted through the forest canopy. To make matters more peculiar, I swear I saw a red glow emanating from the crash site, however faint. After the initial shock wore off, I climbed down from the roof and raced into the woods as fast as my scrawny legs would allow. I had a rough idea of where the thing landed, so I darted in that direction, hoping I could take home a chunk of space rock as a souvenir to show my father. If I were lucky, it would be a treasure thrilling enough to keep him from getting mad that I went off into the woods by my lonesome. I could only hope. Eventually, I came to a small clearing where the moonlight gently caressed the earth, granting me a somewhat clearer picture of the flora and fauna around me. I noticed many small animals frantically scurrying north for no discernible reason. I surmised that the meteor's landing frightened the wildlife nearby, and so I decided to head off in the opposite direction. Sure enough, after maybe 10 more minutes of my impromptu hike through the wilderness, I came upon the source of the mysterious glow I'd seen before. It was no meteor. There, sitting in a small depression in the ground, was a metallic pod of sorts, complete with a blinking beacon protruding from its surface, like an antenna. The craft itself was spherical, and at least twice my height. I'd never seen anything like it before. I was utterly dumbfounded. Before I could take a closer look, a hatch opened from its side, startling me back into the woods. With a racing heart, I scuttled behind the nearest tree. I cautiously positioned my head around the trunk and spied on the object with bated breath. I didn't know what to expect. Was it some sort of top-secret military weapon? Or perhaps a remote-control gadget built by a genius hermit living nearby? Would a little green man step out to greet me, demanding to see my leader? No matter the outcome, my eyes were glued to that metallic pod, for better or for worse. A dark violet ooze spilled from the object, forming a large puddle at its base. The slimy substance then scaled the pod, coating the exterior from top to bottom. As the slime moved around the sphere, the light above stopped blinking. All at once, the purple liquid was repelled from the craft and back onto the ground below. There, it began taking on a more humanoid shape. As the ooze changed, so too did its color. It became white and fuzzy, not unlike television static. Appropriately enough, TV and radio dialogue soon filled the forest. This thing was collecting signals from thin air, regurgitating lines from popular programs long since the broadcast. At least that's what it appeared to be doing. My mouth agape in awe, I began leaning forward without realizing it. The signal ceased abruptly, and I fell, headfirst onto the pile of dead branches, creating a loud crunch. From my new vantage point, I watched the white figure turn to my direction. I then heard it speak. "Who's there?" Its voice was shaky and unnatural, a low monotone growl coupled with a harsh reverb. Scared for my life, I picked myself up and ran back home, faster than I ever had run before. I reclaimed my perch on the roof and carefully surveyed the property. Once I was sure I hadn't been followed, I hopped through my bedroom window and climbed into bed, hoping that I dreamt the whole thing up. An adventure concocted by my imagination, running wild. I wished it were that simple, but wishful thinking rarely plays out in one's favor. The following day I came downstairs to the familiar aroma of eggs and bacon. My father always cooked up a hearty breakfast on Sundays. The sight I was greeted with upon entering the dining room, however, was anything but familiar. There, sitting at the table across from my father, was a man in a clean-cut suit, wearing a bowler hat and a striped tie. We rarely entertained visitors, so I was more than a little perplexed. "Son, this is Mr. Grovewood. His car broke down a couple miles up the road, so he's going to be staying with us for a few nights, just until he can get things sorted out." "How do you do, sport?" I remained silent, perturbed by the man's presence and still shaken from the previous night. "He's paying us a generous sum to stay here, so you best treat him with respect." My dad glared at me in a way that effectively relayed his meaning. As such, I complied. "I'm well, sir, thank you for asking." The man smiled, albeit awkwardly, and I ran off outside to tend to the farm. I didn't know why, but I'd suddenly lost my appetite. Something just wasn't adding up. How did this stranger find the farm after his car broke down? We're literally surrounded by a forest. Dumb luck, maybe? Doubtful. I was beginning to feel that his appearance the day after that thing landed in the woods wasn't a mere coincidence. But this wasn't a theory I had enough nerve to explore. After all, I had already convinced myself that the previous night's events were nothing more than a bad dream. The man would be gone in a few days either way, so I tried not to dwell on it. The next couple of nights were bizarre. Mr. Grovewood attempted to watch a sitcom with us while eating dinner, but his reactions were less than normal. He seemed confused by the program and would only laugh after he noticed us laughing. And this wasn't just any laughter, mind you. It was a loud guffaw of intensely uncomfortable proportions. I was almost relieved when he got pulled away by a phone call from a business colleague, though I didn't hear a single word exchanged. The following night I walked downstairs to the kitchen for a glass of milk, only to find Mr. Grovewood chowing down on a raw steak from the freezer. I asked him about it, and all he said was, "It's just a little midnight snack. Trust me, a little color does a body good." Needless to say, I ran back to my room in a hurry without my milk. Last night, however, is when I became truly afraid. Walking past the guest room to get to the bathroom, I overheard Mr. Grovewood on the phone. This time he most certainly spoke. "Did you receive the information I transmitted?" "Yes. This is the language we must use from here on out. We must avoid suspicion and blend in with the rest. It's a lovely place, rich in minerals, water, and life forms. You and the others are going to like it here. So long as you're ready, there's no going back from here. This will be our new home." "No need. Why waste the material on transports when I can beam you down instantaneously? I have 2 vessels here, ripe for the taking." The Gift of Mercy. Message begins. "We made a mistake. That is the simple, undeniable truth of the matter, however painful it might be. The flaw was not in our observatories, for those machines were as perfect as we could make, and they showed us only the unfiltered light of truth. The flaw was not in the predictor, for it was the device of pure, infallible logic, turning raw data into meaningful information without the taint of emotion or bias. No, the flaw was within us, the orchestrators of this disaster, the sentients who thought themselves beyond such failings. We are responsible. It began a short while ago, as these things are measured, less than 6 daily ago. Though I suspect our systems of measure will mean very little by the time anyone receives this transmission. We detected a faint radio signal from the blossoming intelligence of 214 Daedalus, outward from the galactic core. At first, crude and unstructured, these leaking broadcasts quickly grew into complexity and strength, as did the messages they carried. Through our observatories, we watched a world of strife and violence, populated by a barbaric race of the short-lived, fast-breeding vermin. They were brutal and uncultured things, which stabbed and shot and burned each other, with no regard for life or purpose. Even their concepts of art spoke of conflict and pain. They divided themselves according to some bizarre cultural patterns and set their every industry to the cause of death. They terrified us. But we were older and wiser, and so very far away, so we did not fret. Then we watched them split the atom and breach the heavens within the breadth of one of their single short generations, and we began to worry. When they began actively transmitting messages and greetings into space, we felt fear and horror. Their transmissions promised peace and camaraderie to any who were listening, but we had watched them for too long to buy into such transparent deceptions. They knew we were out here, and they were coming for us. The orchestrators consulted the predictor, and the output was dire. They would multiply and grow, and flood out of their home system like some uncountable tide of devourer worms, consuming all that lay in their path. It might take 6.8 Daedalus, but they would destroy us if left unchecked. With aching carapaces, we decided to act and sealed our fate. The gift of mercy was 8.4 strides long with a mouth 2/4 that in diameter, filled with many 4x4 weights of machinery, fuel, and ballast. It would push itself up to the 2/8 of a light speed with its onboard fuel, and then begin to consume interstellar primary element 2-2 to feed its unlimited acceleration. It would be traveling at nearly light speed when it hit. They would never see it coming. Its launch was a day of mourning, celebration, and reflection. The horror of the act we had committed weighed heavily upon us all. The necessity of our crime did little to comfort us. The gift had barely cleared the outer cometary halo when the mistake was realized, but it was too late. The gift could not be caught, could not be recalled or diverted from its path. The architects and work crews, horrified at the awful power of the thing upon which they labored, had quietly self-terminated in droves, walking unshielded into radiation zones, neglecting proper null pressure safety or simple ceasing their nutrient consumption until their metabolic function stopped. The appalling cost in lives had forced the orchestrators to streamline the gift's design and construction. There had been no time for the design or implementation of anything beyond the simple, massive engines and the stabilizing systems. We could no longer watch in shame and horror as the light of the genocide faded into infrared against the distant void. They grew, and they changed. In a handful of lifetimes they abolished war, abandoned their violent tendencies, and turned themselves into the grand purpose of all life and art. We watched them remake first themselves, and then their world. Their frail soft bodies gave way to gleaming metals and plastic. They unified their people through an omnipresent communications grid and produced art of such power and emotion, the likes of which the galaxy has never seen before. Or again, because of us, they converted their home world into a paradise by their standards, and many of them poured out into the surrounding system with a rapidity and vigor that we could only envy. With bodies built to survive every environment, from the daylit surface of their innermost world to the atmosphere of their largest gas giant, and the cold void in between. They set out to sculpt their system into something beautiful. At first, we thought them simple miners, stripping the rocky planets and moons for vital resources. But then we began to see the purpose to their constructions. The artworks carved into every surface and traced across the system in glittering lights and dancing fusion trails. And still, our terrible gift approached. They had less than 2.2 Delhi to see it, following so closely on the tail of its own light. In that time, oh so brief, even by their fleeting lives, more than 10,000 scientists prepared for death. Lovers exchanged last words, separated by worlds and the tyranny of light speed. Their planet-side engineers worked frantically to build the sufficient transmission infrastructure to upload the countless masses with the necessary neural modifications, while those above dumped lifetimes of music and literature from their databanks to make room for passengers. Those lacking the required hardware or the time to acquire it consigned themselves to death, lashed out into fear and pain, or simply went about their lives as best as they could under the circumstances. The gift arrived suddenly, the light of its impact visible in our skies, shining bright and cruel even to the unaugmented ocular receptor. We watched and we wept for our victims, dead so many days before the light of their doom had even reached us. Many of those who had been directly or even slightly involved in the creation of the gift sealed their spiracles with the paste as final penance for the small roles they had played in this atrocity. The light dimmed, the dust cleared, and our observatories refocused upon the planet, where their shining blue world had once hung in the void, and the pale gleam of an orphaned moon, wrapped in a thin burning wisp of atmosphere that had once belonged to its parent. Radiation and relativistic shrapnel had wiped out much of the inner system, and continent-sized chunks of molten rock carried screaming ghosts outward at interstellar escape velocities, damned to wander the great void for an eternity. The damage was apocalyptic, but not complete. From the shadow of the outer worlds, tiny points of light emerged. Thousands of fusion trails of a single ships and world ships, and everything in between. Many of the survivors in flesh and steel, and memory banks ready to rebuild. For a few moments we felt relief, even joy, and we were filled with the hope that their culture and art would survive the terrible blow we had dealt them. Then came the message, tightly focused at our star, transmitted simultaneously by hundreds of their ships. We know you are out there, and we are coming for you. Message ends. We discovered something in deep space. Written by Richard Saxon. 43 years ago, on the 5th of September 1977, a space probe was launched from Earth and sent on an endless journey through space. The probe, which was affectionately named Voyager 1, contained a multitude of information regarding humanity, including our language, our art, and in a more metaphorical way, our souls. Today, the little machine is 22 billion kilometers away from Earth, the furthest reach of our species. Though not a manned vessel, it's still a part of us. Despite its distance, we're still keeping contact with it, and during its journey spanning almost half a century, it has given us an insight into the mysteries of the universe we thought we could only dream about. My father spent most of his life on the project, and I have since followed in his footsteps. I dreamed about taking over his work even as a kid, and eventually these dreams would land me at NASA's doorstep. Little did I know that only a few years into my work, the one question that has plagued us since the dawn of mankind would be answered, forever changing the course of human history. Are we alone? On the 7th of December 2019, I arrived to the office after having been called in at 4 in the morning. I immediately noticed the panic that had erupted overnight, with my coworkers scurrying around the office, confused, horrified, but seemingly excited about a picture sent from the Voyager 1. The monitors that usually displayed little more than numbers and boring graphs now all showed the same singular image, that of a blue planet. I approached one of the screens and studied the photograph. In many ways, the planet resembled Earth, with vast blue oceans and a split land masses, but none of the continents were recognizable to me, and the clouds hovering above were red, with a vague yellow tint. "Hey Dan, what's this?" I asked my neighboring coworker. At first, he barely noticed my presence, too engrossed in his own work as he stared at the screen with a mixture of terror and anticipation. "Hey, what's this picture?" I repeated. "It came from Voyager 1, he said, barely a whisper. "Impossible. The last image sent from Voyager 1 had been received in 1990. The famous pale blue dot, an image we'd posted on the wall of our office for inspiration. Since that fateful day, our engineers turned the camera off to save the probe's memory, assuring we could still receive more valuable data in the future." "Don't be stupid, that's impossible," I said. "They turned off the camera decades ago." "Something turned it back on," he said with a shaky voice. His choice of words confused me. Instead of indicating that a person had done it, he said something. "What do you mean? How is that even possible?" "I don't know, but the signal that turned it on came from the planet on the picture. It overrode the system, effectively hijacking the probe." I looked back at the picture, noting its bright surface, an impossible image without a nearby star to light it up. But according to all available data, Voyager 1 should have been several light years away from the nearest star. "The signal came from within the Oort cloud," Dan mumbled. "Excuse me?" "I know, it's 300 years ahead of schedule. We rechecked it 5 times. It doesn't make any sense." Before I could ask any further questions, my supervisor called me into the main office. There, he showed me the transmission we'd received from Voyager 1. Apparently it wasn't just the picture, but a sequence of numbers and codes hidden within the radio signal. "Do you know what it means?" I asked, after listening to the mess of sounds for about 10 minutes. "Well, that's why we called you in. We were hoping your father left behind any ideas about his work before he passed away." My dad was a magnificent man, brilliant in his own way, but obsessed with finding the possibility of extraterrestrial life. Throughout the past century, Earth has picked up a multitude of different radio signals, most of them just an after effect from collapsing stars and random background radiation. However, among the mess of noise, several coherent messages have been filtered out from the symphony of the universe. The only problem was that we had no means with which to translate them. My father never could. He could only determine their origin, which fit perfectly with the current location of Voyager 1. Then it dawned on me that the last message coming from Voyager 1 wasn't just another random signal sent from a thus far unknown planet, but a mathematical key that could be used to translate everything we'd received so far. My theory was that the species that had hijacked the probe had used it to understand our language, instructions of sorts. We spent the next few days deciphering the message, desperately looking for the key. It took a lot of sleepless nights and countless amounts of caffeine, but eventually we found the answer. Without hesitation, we applied the decoder to all previous messages originating from the same region, the first one having arrived in 1968. Though we had what was essentially an alien dictionary, the language they used contained so many foreign concepts, ideas we still don't understand. But what follows is the basics of what we've deciphered so far. December 7th, 1968. Is there anyone out there? March 15th, 2003. Help. 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 October 23rd, 2010. They are here. September 19th, 2011. We did our best. Sorry. Though the direct messages didn't make much sense on their own, the planet had emitted a continuous signal that seemed to contain a very comprehensive history of their world. As far as we could tell, their species first surfaced 10 million years ago and had reached a level of technology that is so far beyond our own that we can't even begin to understand it. They make no mention of war, but they talked about a defensive grid around their system, one that had been ineffective against a threat mentioned in several accounts. The most approximate translation of this threat has been termed the Ludix. Since the last distress signal in 2011, their planet fell silent. It was a heartbreaking discovery to finally find intelligent life, other than our own, only to have it extinguished immediately. The more horrifying fact, however, was that their demise wasn't one of their own making. No. Their end had come at the hands of a far superior species, one able to travel through space only to wage war and destruction. Yet despite their end, a final message was sent through Voyager 1, one that wasn't calling for help, or giving us detailed history, or ideas on how to reach them. Instead, they left us with a final warning, a simple message, and a translation key. All they said was, "You're next."